So, first and first, gentlemen, how are you?
We're great. How are you? What time is it there?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. It's 7:30 over here.
Oh, wow.
So, but it's still sunny out and everything, so that's good.
Yeah, it could be the morning there. Whatever room you're in looks nice.
Yeah, we don't have any curtains. That's the thing, at least in this room. So that's why it's very light. But we're not here to talk about my curtains. We're here to talk about the EP that you guys made. So I want to kind of jump straight into it, and especially that concept of desire. So when did that concept when did you notice that concept was on your mind while writing those songs? And
that's a great question. And it's something, Tom, that you say quite a lot, is that you kind of have to write to figure out what you're writing about. And so, when we write songs, a lot of the time we just let your subconscious take over, and naturally, when you're writing songs in a period of time, there's going to be a subject matter that sort of prevails, or at least sort of naturally does. Sure. When we wrote the song with Zoo that was actually called Desire, that was sort of like a flag in the ground of what to sort of construct an EP around. It felt like a strong enough song, something that, that had a bit of weight to it that you could then add some tracks to sort of tell a story. And Tom and I were each working on sort of ideas on our own. And then, when we were writing, Tom had a song called Love We Found, which is the first song on the EP. And when we were writing lyrics together, there started to become this common theme of sort of like wanting and desires and sort of the destruction or the happiness that can cause. And so it happened very naturally, I'd say.
And well, how quickly did everything kind of develop from that song to this EP and everything around it? Because was it a long process in a sense, or was it quite easy to do?
It was longer than it would have been if we had been really focused on making an EP per se. But the way it came together was super natural because we were sort of just writing ideas while on tour, so we were busy touring our last album, and we would sort of book a couple days off in a studio if we had a break, so it just sort of came together, like Jimmy said. Like the collaboration with Zoo sort of was the first track that we finished that felt really like it was something, and like it could be like, oh, maybe we could put something together, and we kind of we're always making little ideas, and we're always writing things, whether it's on a plane or in a hotel room or something. So we had a few bits and bobs coming together, so to speak. And but once we finished the track with Zoo, and then we kind of like, sort of what we do is we finish little rough ideas and we keep them in a playlist and we play them for each other. And as that sort of happens, we, if they start to coalesce around something, then we think about it as a thing. And I think, so the Desire track with Zoo really came together. And then once we started, a few other pieces kind of were together, and then we just kind of worked it out. And I think, it would have taken less time if we had been more focused, but because it was a bit more drawn out because we were so busy touring, it probably came together like, I don't know, like over 8 months or something like that, but I mean, it's weird because it's hard to remember it's hard to say when something officially starts because we're kind of always working on stuff. So even, I think there's songs that might come out on our next album that we might've started before some of the songs on this EP, so it's kind of hard to say, but.
Well, the reason why I ask is because, this idea of a concept record where all of the songs kind of geared towards the same thing is somewhat, I suppose, a lost art these days, where everything is a lot quicker and more single based. So what for you guys was the appeal to make this kind of collective whole and tell the story?
It's something that we've always wanted to do, in the sense that like we've, making DJ mixes and dance music culture has always been a big part of what our band is. And that naturally is a more long format medium than just singles. You go and, we grew up going to clubs watching like Ricardo Villalobos and the New York club scene, like where a night would start at 10 a.m. and end at 10 p.m. and end at 10 a.m., you know,
Sure.
and a DJ would get to play for 3 or 4 hours and sort of tell a story on the dance floor. So that's something that like we've always been very aware of and something that we've always liked. And so then, you know, you couple that with the album format of, you know, bands like Pink Floyd with Dark Side of the Moon, being able to tell a story on an album that flows continuously. We've always thought that, maybe there's a chance that we'll be able to do that, but it's harder. It's easier said than done because, you know, you have to find sort of music that works well in that format. Like, you know, it can run the risk of being stagnant because you can just get stuck on four on the floor for, you know, the whole time. So I just felt that the songs that we were starting to collect, like what Tom was talking about, really were sort of interesting enough musically and also had common themes lyrically where it just really synced up. You know, we sort of got lucky in that sense. And then as soon as we started gearing our minds towards that, it sort of just manifested itself.
And obviously you both come from different musical backgrounds, but were those kind of bands like Pink Floyd, are those kind of bands that were kind of where your different tastes overlap in a way?
Yeah, I think, you know, we both come from different backgrounds in some respect, and that sort of got written about at the beginning of our career, weirdly, but we actually come from a very similar music background. Okay. We grew up in the same city, listening to the same radio stations, and we played in the same kind of bands at the same high school talent nights. And, you know, like, I mean, Jimmy got seriously into dance music, you know, a few years before I did. And in that sense of when we first started working together, he was sort of floating around in a bit already in dance music world. And I was floating around in a more like songwriter world, but I was looking for something with a vibe to, you know, and so we kind of, I think at the beginning, our story sort of was like, me from dance music and Tom from songwriting, and it sort of oversimplified itself. But really, we've always both produced and we've always both written songs. And we've played a bunch of instruments and we listened to a lot of the same stuff growing up. So, and we both love Pink Floyd. I think we both love, you know, they're an obvious reference because they came up in a time when the album was a really sort of the highest pinnacle of the format and artistry that you could aspire to. And I think that, you know, Dark Side of the Moon is one of the greatest concept records or albums of all time for sure. But it was sort of a combination of our starting out where, like Jimmy said, where we were playing tracks all together in DJ sets, and we were very conscious of the arrangements of our songs in terms of how they would be played, mixed in and mixed out of in DJ sets. So I think it was only natural that we eventually got to making a piece of music that was a few pieces of separate music continuously mixed together. It's something we've always wanted to do. And the fact that it all circled around the same lyrical themes was just sort of a byproduct of, you know, what we were going through and how sort of the things that we were thinking about and discussing amongst ourselves in life at the moment. So,
well, that's an interesting point because I don't know if this is true because obviously I get my research from the internet and you never know. But that in previous songs that also you had a similar kind of, you were going through the same things and then just by happenstance, and then you had a song about it. So by spending as much time together, well, I don't know how much you can do now with Corona, but do you have a very similar kind of experiences and do you know of each other's experiences in that sense?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously we do have similar experiences in the sense that, like, you know, we talk a lot about the same sort of politics and we travel the world together, but then we also have our own separate lives, which have our own different sets of experiences, you know? And I think that that's the really great thing about our relationship is that, like, you know, we're sort of like yin and yang. We're alike in many ways and see eye to eye on a lot of things, but then also are like very different people. So I think, you know, it's when we're writing music, not only lyrically, but creatively, to have two different viewpoints, you know, it's like they say, two heads are better than one often. So it's like Tom will see something in a completely different way than I'll see it, and I'll see something different. And, you know, whether it's the lyrics or how a kick drum sounds or anything, like we come together and that's the collaboration of the band, you know?
Mm. Well, and I find that interesting. So, Jimmy, is there one thing that you perhaps learned about life or music or anything from Tom over the last years, and then vice versa, of course?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be there's so much. It would be hard to like pinpoint a specific thing. Okay. But before, I think when we started this project, my focus was I always knew I could write songs, so I was more concerned on the production aspect of things and getting my chops. Like I was like, as long as I can make something sound good, I'll be happy with myself, you know. And I sort of lost track of like the song, you know, which is what people like. I love listening to crazy out there experimental dance music as much as the next person, but the songs are really sort of what stick around. And Tom really pulled me back into that world and really made me fall in love again with like writing songs, you know, and telling stories. And then, so I think like, you know, that's something that we've evolved together and that we constantly learn from. Like, you know, it's really always inspiring to me when we're working and Tom will take whatever we're working on and strip it back just to acoustic guitar and him singing, just to make sure that whatever we're working on, the actual core song structure is, or we're finding out whether or not we're on the right path. And I think prior to working with Tom, that's something that like, you know, I would have never done. So, and now it's just become such a natural, important part of our writing process.
Right. And Tom, for you, is there anything that you've kind of learned or discovered through Jimmy's approach to music, or again, live things on a personal level?
Yes, very many. It's kind of almost hard to remember where, at this point, where an idea was my own first or whether it was Jimmy's first, because we kind of see like we blend together so much. I mean, a lot of the mental process ticking along in my brain, I think is, you know, at least 25% Jimmy's influence. So, yeah, I think.
Sorry, but in that sense, then, is songwriting for the two of you easy? Is that collaboration, the way you do things, has that become quite easy in a sense?
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say if songwriting can be on the one side the easiest thing in the world, and on the other side the hardest thing in the world. So. I think it's the metaphor that I like to think about is sort of like you're walking through a room or you're walking through a house or something, and you open the front door and then you're in the front of the house, and then there's a bunch of other locked doors, and you have to like find your way through the house, and every now and again you come up to a locked door, and you have to find a way to open the door and get to the next room, and sometimes that happens just easily and you just walk straight through and it's fine. And sometimes you come to the door and you can't figure out how to open the door. And so the best thing about a collaboration is that you can either that other person can open the door for you, or they can just do something like that will make you, easily be able to open the door. So, you know, a lot of the time, if Jimmy doesn't, you know, overtly open the door for me, he'll just say something like, I might be singing something and he might just sing it back in his way that like he's singing the same thing, but really it sounds slightly different to me. And then I'll like come up with the next thing, or like, you know, be able to walk through the door. So I think it's sort of a bit of finishing each other's sentences, and it's just having that sort of mirror to bounce things off is really, really useful. I think that like in terms of the main thing that Jimmy has an energy to him that's like he can be very upbeat, and you know, he can be full of energy and a lot of kind of have a fire to him that I think is like that I like, and I have some in me, but it's harder for me to grab. It's less natural. And I think that that's the thing, whether that be in life or in music. I think that's a nice thing that Jimmy kind of helps me with, or like that I've learned a lot from him, is sort of how to how to add a dose of like energy to things, whereas I might be a bit more sort of moody or introspective, or, you know what I mean? So
again, that's then the kind of complementing each other as well in terms of ideas and moods for songs. So if we go back to Desire then, and then obviously you made that with Zoo. Was there a moment in that whole process where you felt, okay, this is going to work? Was there kind of a turning point in making that song?
Is that do you mean in regards to working to Zoo or working with each other?
Oh, both. Just the song. When you kind of felt, well, this song is actually going to work, and we can do something interesting with it.
Yeah, I mean, it came together like, you know, whenever you work with someone, or I should say, even whenever we go in and start an idea, there's, you know, that it could amount to nothing. You have to go in there accepting that. I used this analogy the other day. We were talking with someone. It's kind of like going fishing with your friends. You have to love just the activity of being out on the water, having a couple beers with your friend, and just expect, okay, we might not catch any fish, so like, let's just have fun regardless, you know? Writing music, it doesn't have to be, but I think it should, because there's a chance that it might amount to nothing. So we got together with Zoo and we were like, all right, let's just see what happens, you know? Maybe we would just talk for 4 hours and nothing would happen. But it came together really naturally. You know, we all just started sort of riffing off ideas from each other, and we were all very involved in all the aspects. Like, you know, he would suggest rhythms or grooves and start singing vocal ideas, and Tom would do the same thing, and we were all bouncing off each other. And really the song came together basically in like an afternoon. Like what you end up hearing finished is, I would say 75% of it we got done that afternoon, and the rest of the finishing touches we, you know, finished a little later. But it happened very quickly, and I think like we're quite tough critics, so it's the kind of thing, as soon as we finish something, it takes us a while for our own ideas to win us over. So I think it was like, you know, we did it, we sat on it for a bit and actually went, hey, you know what, this is actually really good, we should finish it.
And well, the the dominant line in that song, I don't want your desire. When because you say it was written quite quickly, well, especially retroactively. How do you see that line now?
That's it. I think that we came up with that line, and then we kind of changed it a couple of times, because we weren't, a lot of the time when we write music, or when you sing an idea, some of the words come at the same time as the melody, and it's not really a conscious thing. You don't really know. A lot of the time you'll just kind of say something and you'll be like, oh, that's kind of cool. What does that mean? You know? And then you kind of, like Jimmy said earlier, you have to write to figure out what you're writing about. And so that line came out, and I think we kind of pondered it over for a while. And I think it really started to come together around the whole theme of the EP, actually, where we were thinking there's this idea of like desire, and you either you have this feeling of frustration and longing because you can't fulfill your desires, or you get told, you try to go after your desires and you fail, or you get what you want and actually there's a whole bunch of horrible things that happen as a result, or you follow your desires and when you know you shouldn't do something and it leads you to ruin anyways. So we just liked it because of this whole idea of desire and the feeling of being free from it. I don't want your desire, I just want to be free. There's also the idea of other people's desires and living up to them for you. And so we just thought it was a really multifaceted sort of universal phrase. And that's partly why we released it as the sort of title track to the EP, because it can sort of be adopted to mean any specific thing that you want it to around that theme of desire, and desire as such a multifaceted concept, and sort of that relationship of longing to be free from it, which is in itself as a desire as well, of sorts. So
sure.
Yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And we just really liked the multifaceted meaning of it.
And that idea of Well, the notion of the desire and the lines between pleasure and pain being very, very, very close, as is beautifully captured in that video that you made. When did that come up to do something like that?
Great question. We for this record, we decided to work with like an artistic director to sort of like help us with the artwork, and we've always been very involved in sort of that process, but we really wanted this time for everything to sort of be cohesive. Like the person that was helping us come up with the album artwork was also involved in the videos and all that. We wanted there to be like a through line, you know? And so this guy named Owen Brown, you know, we initially had we were going to do a live action video, but, you know, obviously COVID got in the way. And so we thought, hey, let's try an animated video. And it ended up actually we're super happy with how it turned out.
Right.
And he, you know, we got on a lot of phone or Zoom calls like this with him, basically talking about like what the record meant or the songs meant. And one of the main inspirations was the Greek myth of Icarus, who, you know, had these wings, wanted to get to the sun, flew too close to the sun, burned, and ended up falling. And so we thought that was a great tale in the sense that it shows that the concept of desire and sort of the destructions and desire have been around for centuries, you know, in human history. And so this was just our job to sort of tell or this is our modern take on it, you know? And so we came up with the ideas for the videos with him of like this idea of a falling man and sort of showing both sides of desire, which is the idea of being isolated and lonely and not getting what you want, and the other side of getting what you want, and maybe that isn't necessarily good for you. So it was a very collaborative process between sort of us and him and the artist, and it ended up being great.
And if this is too personal, obviously you don't have to answer, but what is one moment that maybe you, on a personal level or in music, have gotten maybe a little bit too close to the sun?
That's a good question. Too close to the sun. I've had I don't know. There's a lot of things and I don't know which to say. I think that, like, you know, the best way to answer that is maybe to be broad, but I think taking a bunch of our, for me personally, taking a bunch of the whole, you know, rock star lifestyle of drugs, sex and rock and roll, like that thing, just kind of a bit too far, and having a few close calls with health and being in weird situations and stuff like that. That's sort of some ways that I've gotten too close to the sun a few times. And luckily I've come out on the right side of that. But yeah, that's sort of an overarching way to answer that, maybe.
Right. And that's also a great example of something that's at the time you kind of desire that lifestyle at the time, maybe even before, but then when you're going through it, it's maybe not as fun as you thought it would be, or your desires don't live up to what you thought it would be. So being in this business now for a while, what has your outlook on what you want to do in music and kind of how you approach what you do in music, has that changed at all?
It's funny. Sometimes every once in a while we'll look at each other and say, dude, if somebody gave you an infinite amount of money, what would you change right now? And oftentimes the answer is we would do the exact same thing, except maybe have a nicer house or a nicer car, or something material and stupid. But as far as making music is concerned, that's always the part that never changes, you know? So I think it's for us, it's always about trying to write the best music that we possibly can at the time, you know? And that we've noticed that that's something, you know, your influences change, your inspirations change, but it's, you know, trying to be honest. And, you know, a lot of people say great art is sort of this uncompromising thing, but I think there's something natural in collaboration that happens where when you give in a little bit and allow someone else's ideas the chance to sort of to grow, that there's something extremely not only humbling, but also very powerful in that, you know? And so I think it's about, like, you know, what you're just seeing is the natural evolution of Tom and I figuring out different ways of working with each other and sort of our personal relationship getting stronger, you know?
Mm. There's one other song I want to delve into a little bit, which is the second song, The Blame. And now, I believe on Ordinary Day, there's also a line, we both know I'm to blame. So that idea of blame, well, let me ask it differently. The blame, well, what was the original spark for that song?
That song was, well, that song was actually written. Jimmy had a sort of loop together that inspired the sort of rhythms and stuff like that of that, and then we could just kind of started kicking around melody ideas. And the first line that came was, "I could tell you that my heart beats all alone," which is the first line of the sort of verse, I guess, and that just comes from, another idea about this idea of desire and sort of when desire leads you astray, and sort of feeling remorse for actions taken in following those desires, or like, everybody can relate to the feeling of and not being able to control their emotions and hurting somebody as a result or something like that. And so that song is just sort of an introspective reckoning with having done that and what that means, and sort of feeling remorse for it, so it's just as these things, it's easier to talk about these things in hindsight, obviously, but as they're coming together, it's sort of like it's all a bit foggy and you're not 100% sure. And I think once we sort of wrote that, we thought, this is a really nice sort of just thought about another aspect of desire and where that can, have negative consequences per se. So that's kind of the inspiration behind that song.
This might be difficult to answer or to pinpoint in a way, but when I don't know if you start with lyrics or with music, but do they influence each other? Because I assume it's going to be different for each song.
It is different for each song. Sometimes ideas start, like Tom will just record a voice memo on his phone that is lyrics and guitar or just a melody. Other times we have a beat that we then have to write a melody to. I would say most times lyrics are the absolute last thing we do, because it's such a difficult process. It's something that you want to happen naturally, but you also want to make sense. Like, we put a lot of time and care into the lyrics because we always try to tell a story within a song, and it's sometimes so hard to do that you want to prove to yourself that basically the beat and the melodies are good enough to almost have the song to finish the job,
Right.
So it's lyrics are oftentimes the thing that happens last, but sometimes they're also the thing that happens first. Because when Tom's mumbling, sometimes he'll say something really great, like, I think he just spat out, I don't want your desire, I just want to be free. Like, he said something like that very early on, or he might have not have said those exact words, but something that was close to that, and then you go, oh, that sounds like a great concept for a song. You know what I mean? And you go like, oh, it sounds like you could write a verse telling a story about that. And so, like, every song happens differently, but there always has to be that one thing that to sort of sink your teeth into, or that can help a lot.
Yeah, if we're lucky, we get some. If we're lucky, we get some lyrics, some little bits in it. Like we get it. If we're lucky, we get an idea about what to write it about. Like Jimmy said, like we get some sort of saying that we've had a couple songs where we've had nothing. Like we've literally had placeholder lyrics and they're all just crap, like do da da or whatever, and that's really hard because then you have to like do the whole thing. But hopefully, we get a bit usually.
Because you mentioned structure earlier, and what I especially like about The Blame is the way it's structured and the way the build-up works, and then it goes down again in the ending at the end. So, what is that the result of? Is that just going by ear and trial and error in a sense, or do you move towards a certain goal? Or
I think we kind of have a few. I think we have a few ideas of blueprints in our heads. There's a few a few considerations that are sort of always options. And I think that we kind of balance out what we're feeling in the moment and what feels exciting to us against those blueprints. So, you know, if a song wants to be a bit more typical of a song structure, we'll go with that. It depends on the strength of the different parts. And it's sort of like, it's a bit like puzzle pieces, you know, you kind of have to, hopefully you get a bunch of interesting sections. We usually try and break songs into sections, whether that be like musical sections or melodic sections, and then lyrical sections coupled with that at the end. And then usually we have most of an arrangement, you know, before any sort of lyrics are done. So there might be like a hook idea or something, and then we'll sort of piece it together. And so we try to stay open-minded with our arrangements and the way it builds. And we just kind of like you said, we just kind of feel it, you know, and depending upon all the different parts that we're working with and what we consider to be most interesting, we just kind of feel it out and try and come up with something that's interesting to us, you know?
Right. Final question then. These are strange times. Over here, there's still no shows going on and everything. Are you able to play to any extent at all? And if not, how has this affected you both on a kind of a professional level and the personal level?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like we've talked about this a bunch in the sense, like for the last sort of 7-8 years, you know, we've spent a lot of time on the road playing shows. You know, I think on the last record, we did over 150 shows or something like that, Tom, or around there.
I don't know. It's always a lot.
We've just always played a lot of shows. And so to go from playing tons of shows to none, it's very strange for us. But, you know, we've been doing some live streams in a way to sort of stay connected with the fans and sort of keep our chops up. But those have all been mainly sort of DJ style sets. And, you know, more often than not, we play as like a 4-piece band. And, you know, we both miss traveling with our crew. And, you know, it's a lot of fun to be able to play shows with we're a group of around 7 or 8 of us that travel everywhere. So we miss our relationships with those people. We miss our relationships with the fans. You know, it's been nice to have time at home to work on music, but I think, you know, it's been almost 5 months now and we're really sort of itching to get back out there.
Yeah, same here. Well, one last thought then, because, you mentioned kind of the club thing and I'm blanking for a second, but having played as many shows as you have over the last couple of years, have you had the chance to kind of experience club music from a visitor's perspective in a way? Like I can imagine when you start DJing and when you're playing all those shows every night, you're not going to shows as a spectator as much, I suppose.
I think, like, to be honest, I think that we probably see shows as a spectator more often than we would if it was our job to go see shows as a spectator, because we play a lot of festivals. We play, especially if we're playing club nights, and if you're talking specifically about club shows, you know, like a band show is different because it's more, if it's a band show, it's either you're playing a festival or you're playing your own show or you're opening for a bigger band or something. And there's a lot of repetition with those, with 2 of those, because if it's you every night, it's the same thing. And you might have an opening act, or if you're opening for a big band, it's like the 2 of you every night. So, but still we always make an effort to watch as much as we can. If we're at festivals, you know, there's usually a lot of time to kill. So we try and go and see acts that we're excited about. And then at club nights, if we're booked, you know, those usually run longer. So there's usually a bunch of great acts that we either haven't seen or have seen. And so we always make an effort. We find that to be a big part of our inspiration, you know, and it really keeps us excited about music, is to see what other people are doing and hear other tracks and see how they do things. So to be honest, that's probably a huge thing that we're both missing a lot with not touring so much, as not only playing, but also being able to see and listen to lots of great acts. So, yeah.
Hopefully soon. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, man.